My mother always said the apartment was too small for two adults, but somehow there was always room for my paycheck. The night everything broke open, I was standing in the kitchen in my scrubs, the smell of disinfectant still clinging to me after a 12-hour hospital shift, when she slid a stack of envelopes across the counter like she was dealing cards in a rigged game. Late notices. Red ink. Final warnings. She didn't look at my face once. "Since you think you're so smart," she said, her voice sharp and tired in that way that meant I was about to be blamed for something I didn't create. "You can start acting like it. Pay your own bills." I laughed under my breath at first, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. I was already paying most of them: rent, internet, groceries, her prescriptions, when she forgot I was 23 years old and somehow the financial spine of a woman who never missed a chance to remind me that she gave birth to me. I tried to explain, quietly, the way I always did. I covered the last rent increase. I paid the credit card. "I just need a break this month." She slammed her palm on the counter. "A break? Do you think I get breaks? You live under my roof." That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but clean, like glass snapping under pressure. I looked around the kitchen I had grown up in, the chipped cabinets, the buzzing light fixture, the space where my childhood used to live, and I realized I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was her insurance policy, her safety net, her excuse. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I went to my room, packed a duffel bag, grabbed my laptop, my documents, and the only framed picture I owned, me at 16, smiling with the future I hadn't yet handed away. When I walked past her toward the door, she scoffed. "You'll be back," she said. I didn't answer. I didn't look back. I just stepped out into the cold night, not knowing where I was going, only knowing I couldn't stay. I slept on my friend Marissa's couch that first night, staring at the ceiling, while the city hummed outside like nothing had just shattered inside me. The quiet felt wrong. No yelling, no slammed doors, no voice reminding me how much I owed just for existing. In the morning, while Marissa made coffee, she asked the question no one had ever asked me before. "Leah, why are all the bills in your name?" I froze. I've never questioned it. Utility accounts. Internet. A credit card, she said, was for emergencies. She always handled the paperwork. Told me where to sign, said it was easier that way. Family doesn't screw each other over, right? That afternoon, while my mom was out, I went back to the apartment to get the rest of my things. That's when I saw the mail piled on the table. Envelopes I'd never opened. Accounts I didn't recognize. My name printed so clearly it made my stomach drop. I sat on the floor and opened them one by one, my hands shaking harder with each page. Credit cards I never applied for. A personal loan. Past due utilities stretching back months. Thousands of dollars, all in my name. All ignored. All quietly ruining my future. While she screamed at me to be responsible. The betrayal didn't feel hot. It felt cold and hollow, like something had been hollowed out of my chest and replaced with understanding. This wasn't survival. This was theft. When I spread the papers across Marissa's table that night, she didn't soften it for me. "Leah, this is identity fraud." The word sounded too big to belong to my life. "She's your mom," I whispered, like that explained everything. Marissa shook her head. "No. She's someone who used your love as leverage." That was the first time I realized how carefully she'd trained me. Guilt dressed up as gratitude. Fear dressed up as family. I stayed up all night pulling my credit report, documenting every account, every date, every lie. For the first time, I wasn't cleaning up her mess. I was collecting evidence. And somewhere between the screenshots and the notes, the sadness hardened into resolve. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my life back. The next morning, I went to a legal aid office downtown, the kind with mismatched chairs and posters about tenants' rights peeling off the walls. I laid everything out on the desk like a confession. The woman helping me listened without interrupting, then said something that changed everything. You are not required to carry someone else's consequences. Just because they raised you, she helped me file disputes, freeze my credit, and remove my name from every account tied to that apartment. When I called the electric company and asked to be taken off, the representative warned me gently. Once you're removed, service could be disconnected if the balance isn't paid. I swallowed. I understand, I said. Please proceed. Hanging up felt like stepping off a Lachand, realizing the ground might actually be under me. Weeks passed. I found a cheap room, picked up extra shifts, started rebuilding piece by piece. Then, one evening, my phone lit up with her name. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Why is the power off? She screamed the second I picked up. What did you do? I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding, my voice calm in a way it had never been before. I paid my own bills, I said. I stopped paying yours. Silence. Then rage. Threats. Guilt. The same cycle, finally broken. You think you're teaching me a lesson? She spat. You're destroying me. I closed my eyes. No, I said. I just stopped letting you destroy me. She didn't have a response to that. When the landlord called days later to confirm she was facing eviction, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. She once told me to prove I was grown by paying my own bills. I did, and for the first time, she had to face hers alone. The fallout didn't come all at once. It came in waves, each one testing whether I would fold the way I always had before. First were the messages, dozens of them swinging wildly between rage and pity. One minute she was calling me heartless. The next she was reminding me how she stayed up late sewing my Halloween costumes. How she worked 2 jobs when I was little. How I owed her for surviving my childhood. I read them without responding, my hands shaking, my chest tight with a familiar panic. For years, those words had been enough to pull me back in line. This time, I let them sit unanswered. Then she changed tactics. She called my relatives, told them I'd stolen money from her, that I'd abandoned her, that she was sitting in a dark apartment because her own daughter turned her back. My aunt called first, her voice sharp with judgment. How could you do this to your mother, Leah? She's struggling. I didn't defend myself right away. I asked one question instead. Has she shown you any of the bills? Silence. Any statements? Any proof? Another pause. No, my aunt admitted, but she wouldn't lie about something like this. I swallowed hard. Come over tonight, I said. I'll show you everything. That evening, I walked into my aunt's living room with a folder so thick, it barely closed. My mom was already there, wrapped in a cardigan, eyes downcast, playing the role she perfected, fragile, wounded, betrayed. When my aunt told me to explain myself, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I opened the folder. Electric bills in my name, credit cards I never opened. Loan agreements with my information and handwriting that wasn't mine. My credit report, page after page of damage. The room went quiet in a way that felt heavy and final. She told me you handled all of this, my aunt said slowly, looking at my mom. She told me you agreed. My mom exploded. We're family, she shouted. Kids help their parents. I looked at her then, really looked, and realized something painful and freeing. She didn't see me as her child. She saw me as a resource. And when that resource stopped producing, she called it betrayal. The landlord showed up uninvited but perfectly on time. He'd been trying to reach the cosigner, he explained, which was how my name had ended up dragged into this mess for years. He confirmed what I already knew. My name was officially removed from the lease. The remaining balance, entirely hers. If it wasn't paid, eviction would follow. My mom stared at me like I'd just pushed her off a cliff. You planned this, she whispered. You humiliated me. I shook my head. No, I just stopped lying for you. The room erupted into chaos accusations. Tears. Anger ricocheting off the walls, but none of it stuck to me the way it used to. I left that night feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Over the next weeks, the consequences accelerated. Notices posted on the apartment door. Utilities shut off. Family members stopped calling me a villain and started asking her hard questions she'd avoided for years. She hated that most of all. When she showed up at my door unannounced, I didn't invite her in. She stood there looking smaller, older, stripped of the authority she used to wield so effortlessly. I made mistakes, she said. I panicked, I nodded, and I paid for them. For years, she asked me to fix it, to help just this once. I didn't. I already helped, I told her. I just won't hurt myself to do it anymore. When eviction day came, she called me from a borrowed phone. Her voice cracked as she described her life being carried out onto the sidewalk. She asked if I was happy. I thought about the sleepless nights, the anxiety, the debt, the years I spent shrinking so she could feel taller. No, I said, I'm free. She called that revenge. I called it survival. For the first time, I understood the difference. After the apartment was emptied and the door locked behind her, the noise finally stopped. No more messages, no more demands, no more emergency after emergency designed to pull me back under. The silence was unsettling at first. I'd lived my whole life reacting, fixing, paying, apologizing. Without her chaos, I had to figure out who I was without the constant pressure of being needed. Therapy helped. So did time. I learned words for things I'd never been allowed to name: financial abuse, emotional manipulation, parentification. I learned that guilt doesn't always mean you're wrong. It often means you were trained to feel responsible for someone else's feelings. My credit slowly began to recover. The investigations moved forward. Some accounts were removed. Others were flagged. It wasn't instant justice, but it was movement, and that mattered. Family gatherings changed. Some people kept their distance. Others quietly apologized. My aunt told me one night I didn't want to believe it, because it meant admitting we all looked away. I didn't blame her. I've looked away too. From myself. I thought about my mom often, not with rage, but with a complicated mix of grief and clarity. I loved her. I probably always would. But love didn't mean surrender anymore. One evening, months later, I paid my rent online, turned on the lights in my own place, and sat on the floor eating takeout I bought without fear. No one could take this from me. She once dared me to prove I was grown by paying my own bills. She never imagined I'd also stop paying hers. That decision cost her comfort, her lies, her safety net. It gave me something far more valuable, a future that finally belonged to me. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after my mother lost the apartment. There was no triumphant montage, no instant peace. What I gained instead was something quieter and harder: space. Space to feel things I'd been too busy surviving to process. Some nights, I lay awake replaying memories I hadn't thought about in years. The way she used to sit on the edge of my bed when I was sick, humming softly. The way she held my hand crossing the street when I was small. Those memories hurt now. Because they existed alongside others, I couldn't erase the slammed doors, the bills tossed at me, the way love was always followed by obligation. I learned in therapy that grief doesn't only belong to death. Sometimes you grieve the living. Sometimes you grieve the parent you needed but never really had. I started building routines that belonged only to me. Grocery shopping without calculating how much I'd need to send her later. Opening my banking app without fear. Making plans without asking permission. Small things, but each one rewired something inside me. Still, the guilt lingered like a ghost that refused to leave quietly. Every time I laughed too hard or felt proud of myself, a voice whispered that I was doing it at her expense. My therapist helped me sit with that voice instead of fighting it. That guilt kept you attached, she said. It doesn't get to run your life anymore. Around that time, I ran into someone from my old neighborhood who asked about my mom. I told the truth without drama. She made choices. I stopped covering for them. The words felt strange, but powerful. I realized I was no longer shrinking my story to protect hers. Meanwhile, I heard through family that she was staying with relatives. burning bridges one by one. Anyone who helped her quickly became the next villain when they set boundaries. It was painful confirmation of what I'd already learned. This wasn't about me. It never had been. I started volunteering extra hours at work. Not to escape, but because I finally had the energy. I even laughed one day when a coworker complained about paying bills. Because for the first time, those bills felt like mine in a way that didn't terrify me. Independence wasn't glamorous. It was boring, steady, earned, and for someone like me, that felt revolutionary. About a year after everything collapsed, I got an email I didn't expect. It was from my mother. Not a demand, not a threat, just a few short lines. She said she was in a counseling program through a community center. She said she was sober for now. She didn't apologize directly, but she acknowledged that she made mistakes and that she was learning about boundaries. I stared at the screen for a long time. The old version of me would have rushed to reply, offering forgiveness like a peace treaty, stepping back into the role of fixer. This time, I didn't. I talked it through in therapy. I sat with the discomfort. Eventually, I wrote back not with promises, not with money, but with honesty. I told her I hoped she continued getting help. I told her I wasn't ready for a relationship. I told her trust wasn't something that reset just because time passed. Hitting send felt terrifying and empowering all at once. She didn't respond for weeks. When she finally did, it was shorter, less defensive, still distant. And that was okay. I was learning that closure doesn't always come wrapped in apologies. Sometimes it comes from standing still while someone else has to do the work. My life continued expanding in small but meaningful ways. My credit improved enough to qualify for my own lease. I moved into a modest apartment, with sunlight in the mornings and silence at night. I bought a couch with my own money. I hung pictures without asking anyone's opinion. Family dynamics shifted permanently. Some relatives still whispered that I'd been too harsh. Others quietly admitted they wished they'd had my courage. I stopped trying to convince anyone. I'd spent enough of my life explaining myself. One evening, while paying my bills at the kitchen table, I realized something that made me smile. There was no panic, no dread, just numbers and responsibility, mine and then only mine. That was the difference. Responsibility chosen feels nothing like responsibility forced. I wasn't bitter anymore. I was aware. And awareness, I learned, is what actually breaks cycles. The last time I saw my mother was brief and unplanned. We ran into each other outside a grocery store. She looked older, quieter, less sharp around the edges. For a moment, we just stood there, two people sharing history without knowing how to hold it. She asked how I was. I told her the truth. I'm stable. She nodded like that word carried weight she'd never managed to hold on to. She didn't ask for money. She didn't blame me. She just said I didn't know how to be what you needed. I believed her. That didn't erase what happened, but it softened something in me. We parted without promises, without hugs, without anger, and that felt like progress. Walking home, I thought about how far I'd come from a girl drowning under someone else's debts to a woman standing on her own name. I used to think strength meant endurance, staying, paying, sacrificing, until there was nothing left. Now I know strength sometimes means leaving, saying no, letting people face the consequences of their own choices even when it hurts to watch. My mother once challenged me to prove I was grown by paying my own bills. She never imagined that meant I'd also stop paying for her life. Her lies, her avoidance. I didn't win anything from that decision. I gained something better. Peace, stability, a future that wasn't collateral for someone else's past. If you're listening to this story and wondering whether you're allowed to step back to protect yourself, to choose your own survival over someone else's comfort, this is your permission. You're not selfish for refusing to be used. You're not cruel for setting boundaries. You're not ungrateful for wanting a life that belongs to you. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fixing what's broken. It's putting it down and walking forward anyway. That's what I did. My name is Leah, and for the first time in my life, Every bill I pay and every breath I take is truly my own.